In the late 1960s, at the end of the 1960s, I got very inspired by things that were being discovered about how we can gain conscious control over aspects of what was called the autonomic nervous system, which was thought to be automatic. And now we know that that's very much possible, and there's been lots and lots of research now for decades. And that was the beginning of the field called biofeedback. And now there are many, many, many applications of biofeedback. My work led into investigating aspects of the musical experience and aspects of aesthetic experience that could somehow be correlated with what we could measure that is going on in the brain. At that time it was fairly primitive, but yet still exciting and interesting. And so over the years, especially through the 1970s and into the 80s, I got very involved with music and neuroscience. Recently, I was contacted by some friends at a place at the University of California in San Diego called the Schwartz Center for Computational Neuroscience. And I was surprised. They had been reading my work that they had written, and they said, "We've read about the things that you speculated would someday be possible. We think we can do it now. Would you like to collaborate?" And so I got back into it. And now I've made several new pieces that involve the brain. And this is one that I can travel with easily. So I used the same title again. So it's now the third version of Portable Gold and Philosopher's Stones. But this time it's called Deviant Resonances. And that idea comes from the fact that I'm looking at things that are hard to pin down. That is to say, you know, some of the ideas about music and neuroscience have to do with, let's find out exactly what's going on in the brain when you think about playing an E-flat chord, right? But that's not so interesting to me. What's interesting to me is the stuff in between that is very elusive and moves around in ways that are hard to track. Because I don't think we can ever make an absolutely perfect one-to-one match. So the metaphor of resonance, it permeates a lot of my music, even music written for instruments that don't involve electronics, because I'm interested in the idea of essentially processes that differentiate themselves in the world, and usually there's some kind of feedback that makes that happen. There are two performers, and a second really important concept in the piece is what I call active imaginative listening. There are two performers who will be wearing little monitors that go on. They look like kind of like a pair of glasses, but they have electrodes in the front that capture brainwaves and send them to my computer system. And I monitor the electronics, and then at some point I start to play with them. And what's happening is, first we look at what are called the coherent waves of the brain, the relatively smooth ones, and we make a harmonic complex that they learn to interact with. So you hear these sort of pulse wave chords and harmonic series things that come out that are being controlled by these coherent waves. And then pretty soon we start to detect interruptions, changes in those coherent waves, which are usually associated with some kind of shift of attention. And those cause electronic things to ring. You hear these ringing things that start to come out. It's about being deeply involved in the listening experience and paying attention to what they want to do, right? So as they direct their attention in different ways, the sound, they interact with the sound. And then the sound gets more complex and it gets richer and richer, and then I start to play with them. So I'm playing like a musician. So I make a sound, and they hear it, and they react or not, depending on how their attention is moving around. And then so we're interacting with each other, and then slowly we end by settling back down the way we started. So they are active performers, and the medium that they use, the instrument that they use, is listening.
Thank you.